Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Women-owned businesses in Vermont are on the rise and have been for some time, but recognition of their impact on the state economy has remained limited. The Vermont Women's Fund decided to find out more about women entrepreneurs from sole proprietor to large businesses, who they are, what they're doing, and what unique needs they may have. To talk about this data gathering initiative and share what's been learned so far, we welcome Meg Smith. She is the director of the Vermont Women's Fund. Thank you so much for joining us, Meg.
Thank you, Fran. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first, tell us about This Way Up. What is it and why was it important for you to take on?
This Way Up, There's Power in Our Numbers, is an initiative of the Women's Fund that we took on after discovering several years ago that there is no data on the number of women-owned businesses in the state. We know in Vermont, through the Secretary of State's office, that there are 81,132 businesses registered in the state, but we do not know how many are owned by men versus women. And given the long history of women being denied credit and having difficulty to access capital and a whole lot of just implicit bias over the years, that we think it really matters to know how many women do own these businesses and how we can help stimulate their growth. That's the underlying thing, is that we want to help Vermont's economy grow.
Fantastic. And even you have these great graphics of women's owned businesses and statistics. And so go back just quickly, change the story. How did this come about?
Change the Story was an initiative of the Women's Fund, along with two other partners, the Vermont Commission on Women and Vermont Works for Women. And we set out 7 years ago to fast track gender equity in the state. And what we had to do to start with that was collect research and data, because no one knew anything about women's economic status in Vermont at that time. And one of the reports was on women's business leadership and ownership and its impact on the state economy. And that's when we found out, lo and behold, nobody knew how many women-owned businesses there were. And we talked to the Secretary of State's office, we talked to many other folks, and that data just was never aggregated by gender. So we decided it was important enough to highlight women's business ownership. And we set out to try and count and identify the number of women-owned businesses in the state.
So let's take a look at some of the numbers and what they tell you. And first is from the Census of 2015, which began to give you a little bit of sense of what was going on. Let's take a look at that slide.
We found out back then that there were over 23,000 businesses owned by women. Now, we used census data, had to scrape census data for that, so none of this was super conclusive, but it gave us a very good general snapshot. We also found out that women-owned businesses employed over 36,000 people in the state, and collectively, they contributed $2.2 billion to the economy. We also found out at that time that when you looked at the revenues of women-owned businesses, that they basically made roughly 19 cents to the dollar of male-owned businesses. And now that number was not just revenues, it was also growth. So a woman-owned business was not growing at the same pace or scale as a male-owned business. So that huge gap in revenue was one of the reasons that we took on This Way Up, because we felt if we can stimulate growth, then we are helping women and helping Vermont's economy at the same time.
Absolutely, and that is just a stunning gap. So the next slide was showing, the survey. You've begun the survey, and you're starting to collect data, and it's showing what you're doing, so that the numbers continue to grow, and you have that on your website. But let's look at that slide we saw for a minute of some of the people that have already taken the survey. So you're learning more about women and women-owned businesses.
Exactly. This slide shows the middle figure, 1,666, is the number of survey signers that have signed up. Actually, that number has grown since even this slide began, because every day we have new women-owned businesses taking the survey. And if you look at the other statistic that 1,400 of them own 51% or more. And that number is important, the 51% ownership, because to qualify as a federally recognized woman-owned business, you have to own 51% or more.
Great. That's an interesting statistic. So what has been most surprising as these numbers, as these surveys come in? What surprised you?
A couple of things have surprised us. One was the number of women who call themselves serial entrepreneurs, that they've started more than one business. Over a third of our survey signers have started more than one business. So we have a strong entrepreneurial spirit in this state. And as a result of the pandemic, more and more women who had to leave the workforce in order to care for their families or had jobs that put them too much at risk, they are now reinventing and reimagining how they can create a livelihood. So entrepreneurism is really on the rise. We have more and more women of all ages, and men as well, starting businesses as a way to circumvent some of the challenges that they were facing in the workforce.
Right. And what kind of businesses are we talking? We're talking everything from making jam to international biotech.
Manufacturing. Yeah.
Manufacturing.
There's paper mill manufacturers that Polmac actually is a paper mill manufacturer that makes equipment for that is been in business in Vermont for several years. It's surprising. There's an orchid grower and distributor down in Pownell. The range of women's businesses and what they're providing is staggering. So yes, it's food. It's also services, consulting, job coaching. But again, very hardcore businesses like manufacturing. And, you look at even a business like Vermont Creamery, which makes butter and cheese and some other wonderful things. That is not woman owned, but it is women led. We also ask women business leaders to take the survey. So the breadth and depth of businesses in Vermont is pretty astounding.
Well, you have a really impressive interactive map. So we're going to show this, and how does this work? You can actually click on these things and find the name of a business if you want, or tell us a little bit about this map.
Well, the map populates. The wonderful and really cool thing about this website is that the data is aggregated in real time. So when you sign up as a survey signer, your information goes right in and your dot on the map appears. So everyone can look at this survey and look at the results. It's all transparent. So that little dot that you click on, you will see the name of the business and the website. So you can track in your county, in your area, just by clicking on the dots there to see what businesses exist already, and that will continue to populate. But one of the exciting things, if you notice on the map, is how well the whole state is represented.
Right.
So we are not just Chittenden County focused. We have representation throughout the state, and that will just continue to grow.
And the other thing that was intriguing to me is some of the survey questions are very interesting and unusual for typical business data, like what life changes led you to start a business? What does success mean to you? What are major challenges? Are you ready to mentor, among others? What stands out for you so far from some of the answers to these more personal questions?
I think, where did women get the funding to start their business? We actually have a slide of that. 43% of those women said they didn't need funding. They slowly built their business up over time, which sounds like a wonderful, resourceful, very Vermont kind of value, which I resonated with until I showed this survey and slide to an investment manager who said, if half of those women had taken a risk and gone out and found capital outside of just saving it themselves, they could have grown their business faster. They could have hired more employees. They could have had a bigger impact. And I think that is part of what we are seeing and we want to demonstrate with this way up, there's power in our numbers, that by taking risk, by taking advantage of the technical assistance that exists in this state, and there's a lot, that there are ways for women to grow their business faster and more effectively. We have something like 80% of the businesses are solopreneurs, as we call them, one-person businesses. If 1 out of 4 of those solo businesses took on one employee, it would create 5,000 jobs in the state.
Wow.
So it's that mentality of how do we grow in a positive way?
Right. And only 10% went to the bank, which is kind of stunning. But I'd like to make sure that people know how to take the survey.
Yes.
You know, it sounds like it might be long, but it can take just 7 minutes. It's thiswayupvt.com. That's where they go to take the survey, right?
Yep. And you can also see the results on that website. If you go to thiswayupvt.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little thing that says today's numbers. And you just click on that, and that's where you'll see the slides that we're showing now.
And fantastic. And you'll continue to collect through the end of the year. What is your goal?
Our goal is to get 10,000 signers. And when I say signers, I mean women who are in business, whether they have a full-time business, part-time, a side gig, they're just bringing a little income. That means crafters and the whole gamut of service providers in our state that are there, whether you're a beauty salon or a florist or a manufacturer.
And we're running out of time, so quickly, what's next?
Okay.
You get all this information.
What's next is really opportunities to lift these businesses up. We have ideas to create mentorship programs for the women-owned businesses by industry or by region, a platform to connect just for support, an investment fund to give out microloans. There's a ton of great opportunities that we'll be assessing by the fall.
Meg Smith, thank you for all your great work at the Vermont Women's Fund and the Vermont Community Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Fran, and please sign up and take the survey. It's so important to our state.
Perfect, absolutely. And thank you again for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.